What's up, guys? Spencer here from the Fantasy Files, and I have just finished the Expanse series, and I have some opinions. I am absolutely devastated that this series is over after spending 9 books and hundreds of audiobook hours with these characters, and I'm going to get into all of that with you guys. I just finished this today, so I'm still kind of figuring out my thoughts and feelings about the second half of the series and the ending to Leviathan Falls in particular. So I may kind of meander a bit, so just bear with me. I posted a spoiler-free review for the first half of the series a while ago that I will link in the annotations above somewhere up there. There it is. So this one will be primarily about the second half of the series, although I'll most likely talk a little bit about the first half kind of in retrospect. And what I'm going to do is give kind of a spoiler-free review of the series, having now read the whole thing. And then in a bit, I'll jump into full spoilers for the series to give you my more specific thoughts. Before I do that, I'll ask you to please hit those like and subscribe buttons down below and ring that little bell icon to get notified when we put up new content, because it really helps us out a lot to grow the channel and to catch the attention of authors who we reach out to be on the podcast. You can also follow us over on Twitter at Files Fantasy to keep up with what we're currently reading, watching, stuff like that. But enough of that. Let's talk about The Expanse. And fair warning, I have a lot of complaints about the second half of the series, which will definitely outweigh the things I enjoyed. So I totally understand if you don't want to hear me take just a steaming dump all over these books. But there is a lot that I did like, so let's start with that. Far and away, the best part of the series is its characters. I absolutely loved my time getting to know these characters and watch them grow as they got older and older, which was also a really cool part about the later books. And for the most part, I really did like their character arcs up until that last book. There was only one time jump that I disliked a lot, but overall I did enjoy the sense of watching them change and grow as the years flew by. Amos and Holden remained my favorite characters. I think that they're just perfect archetypes that work really well. But I found myself disliking Alex more and more as the series went on, which I'll talk about more in the spoiler section. However, most of these characters I really did enjoy up until the end there. I really liked their character arcs. They remained fun characters. There was a couple choices with certain characters near the end that I was kind of like, I don't like that much. But for the most part, I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed the progression of technology in these books all the way up until the end. It all moved forward in a really believable way. Like at the beginning, that they're in their ships, and when they go on a hard burn, when they're going super fast, they have to get like this juice injected into them so that they don't like wig out in the middle of all this. And near the end, instead of like having these needles inject them with the juice, it's like a gas that they breathe on some of the newer ships. And I thought it was really cool. It was really interesting to, these books take place over, whole people's lifespan. And so it shows a lot of thought on the author's part to kind of put those little tweaks and stuff in there to showing that, technology grows and it changes and it adapts. And I really like that. I also loved how these are kind of the everyman's sci-fi story. They start out pretty simple to understand, especially with the technology and political powers. I feel like all the rules of the world were laid out pretty simply for the reader to understand. And it pretty much stayed that way throughout the whole series, but it also does kind of get a little bit more complex near the end, kind of adding, new rules into the system and new political parties. and it gives you as a reader something to grow with as the series goes on, and it gives you something to sink your teeth into near the end. And these books would probably be really good for rereads. I could see myself gaining a lot more on the second time through, and now that I know where everything is kind of headed. And also the introduction of various political parties and world leaders and factions, for lack of a better term. I think the books introduced these groups in a way that was really believable, aside from one or two characters within the middle of the story there. But I think, this is a story of a very possible future. You could see people kind of getting, tribalized in a lot of these ways, and you could see the same kind of dilemmas coming up in our own world. And most of all, I love the world that this takes place in this future universe. I've had a ton of fun kind of living in this world for a while reading these books. And for the most part, I've loved the story. I really have. And really, it's the characters and the world that make this story so fantastic in a lot of ways. Okay. So, lastly, should you read this series? Now that I'm done, if you're somebody who has never read The Expanse before and you clicked on this video and you're like, I just want to know if I should read it, I think my answer is still yes, but I think you are going to have a much better time if you go into it with no preconceived notions about how it will end or what will be included in the story overall, and are open to the series not being exactly what you thought it would be. You'll probably enjoy it. And I say that especially after book four. Book four sets up a lot of things, and it's really easy for your mind to kind of spin out and say, oh, like, this is going to happen now. Like this being introduced means this is going to happen. And that's really just not the way it goes. So I would keep your expectations low and be happily surprised. Okay, so moving on to what I didn't like. Speaking of book four and the expectations that I had coming out of that book, I think after finishing that book, I definitely had this idea of where the story would go. I had this grand idea of turning it into this massive deep space exploration story, and it simply isn't that. And we do get to see a lot of these other worlds and other parts of like the solar system and everything. But book four led me to believe that we would be discovering God in this story, and that's just that's just not the kind of story it is, really. So I'll talk about this more in the spoiler section, but the ending felt super rushed. I kind of felt like there should have been at least two more chapters kind of wrapping everything up and saying goodbye to a lot of the characters. There's also a lot of side characters that played major roles in the story, and we just never really see them again, which is a huge bummer because some of them I really, really liked. Honestly, the final book felt more like the second to last book with a hastily written ending, basically just saying goodbye to the reader. It felt really, really rushed. There were a few books in the middle that I think could have been just one book or maybe taken out altogether. I think this series could have worked much better as 6 books, like 2 separate trilogy arcs. I think that perhaps the series went on a little bit longer than it should have. And I think they could have told a much better story if they had kind of, brought it down a little bit and made it fewer books. And lastly, I personally did not enjoy the ending. I know that there's a lot of people out there who did, but this is just kind of like my feelings on it. I I did not quite feel satisfied about it. Not only was it rushed, but I felt like some of the character decisions were kind of weird and sad, and it just didn't leave me feeling satisfied. I kept feeling like there was a next book that I should be reading to finish out the story. Like it literally it literally feels like it just gets cut off. It's weird. All right, so that is all the spoiler free stuff that I have to say. I'm going to be going into spoilers now. So here is your spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. Okay, so I am going to rant a little bit, and I'm sorry, but why didn't we see the fucking aliens after all this buildup in book 4, where we get to see alien ruins and even some alien species, and we learn that the proto molecule was made by these alien gods who had to like shut everything down. Surely it can only get crazier from here. Surely near the end we'll be interacting with these deep space aliens and have giant space battles with them in these big trippy scenes like we got in I think it was book 1 or 2, where Holden has like the vision and he sees like how the world was created and all this stuff. I think that's when it was. I don't understand why we didn't get that. Yeah, that was easily the biggest letdown for the second half of the series. Like, why would you blow your load with the 4th book, which was so cool, and then we just forget all of the alien stuff for like 3 books straight? And even when the proto molecule comes back, it's just humans using it in kind of basic ways when there's so much potential for this stuff. And I understand that, humans are trying to learn how to use it, and, they don't have the mind to use it in some of the bigger ways that it's meant to be. But I thought we would get there. I expected it to be like this super weapon that would destroy planets and solar systems, and that would kind of be our end game. But we never got there. It was just human leaders trying to use it to the hive mind was arguably a pretty big thing, but I was thinking bigger than that. I was thinking that it was going to be like this huge super weapon. I don't know. Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer from the editing room here. I was kind of going through some of this video that I had recorded last night, and I realized a lot of it was really, really negative. I still hold those same opinions, but I wanted to add in some things that I did like as I thought more about it today. I'll probably be taking this clip and cutting it up and kind of putting the bullet points into the video where they fit best. So editing Spencer will kind of pop in and out throughout the next little while. So I was really upset when Avasarala died in, I think it was the 7th book. I'm pretty sure it was the 7th book or the 8th book where she passed away. She was one of my favorite characters next to Amos, and I really, really liked how I think in books 9 and 8, she kind of kept popping back into his head, or maybe it was just the last book. Honestly, that the whole end of the series kind of runs together for me. But I like how she popped in every now and then with Holden, and it was kind of these moments of like, what would Avasarala do, or what would she say? And if you guys listen to the audiobooks, it's the narrator doing the Avasarala voice and kind of just popping that in there. I really enjoyed those moments. Let's talk about Marco Inaris and his son Philip. They were by far my least favorite parts of the story. Like, I probably will not be rereading those books specifically. It made absolutely no sense for them to be there. They did almost nothing for the story. And Naomi having this random son somewhere out in space just felt super shoehorned in. It felt like kind of a last minute decision, and didn't feel like something that it didn't feel like something that she wouldn't have told Holden about, if that makes sense. And of course, it's Philip's dad that becomes the big bad for that book. Like, it just felt so cliche. And after all the proto molecule stuff, he just felt like such an insignificant threat, just some human being human. I don't know. Like, I felt like after book 4, I've said a couple times, I expected the aliens to come and to be fighting, aliens, or kind of figuring that out for the rest of the series. I think that these characters could have been good if the authors had, put that in the first 3 books. If they had had like Marco and Philip be like books 2 and 3 or something, and then at book 4, go to the alien planets, or even push that until like book 6, and then 7, 8, and 9 could be like the big like alien storyline. I think that they should have gotten all of the human stuff out of the way at the beginning of the series, and then gradually like make the stakes higher and higher and higher with more alien reveals. I think that would have been great, because otherwise it feels like, they did all this cool alien stuff, and then they wrote a bunch of filler stuff until we got to the Lyconia storyline, and I didn't even like that. And so it's, I don't know. As much as I hated Marco and Philip as bad guys, I really couldn't stand them at all. I really did like Singh. He was an excellent villain, and at first he kind of seems like, just like this dictator kind of guy, and it's like, okay, he's the bad guy, but then you realize that he's actually struggling with a lot of like pride and ego issues. Even when he fired Tanaka, he fires her, and he's all like, up on his high horse and everything. And he's like, I gotta keep my image good and all this stuff. So then Duarte contacts him, and he's like, hey, do you want to tell me why you fired her? And this whole kind of thing unravels, where we start to realize, and I think he says, he talks to Tanaka, and he's like, honestly, like, I apologize, like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, but I can't go back on it now, because that would make me look even weaker, and right now we can't afford that. But if I could take it back, I would. And so that kind of gives context to everything else that he's doing throughout that book. And it makes him a really good villain, because he's really believable. I mean, how many times have we as readers done something in our lives to kind of save our pride and to try to save face? I think that was just a really, really cool character aspect for a villain, especially. And Duarte was really cool too. I don't have much to say about him, but I thought that it was interesting having a villain who, he's doing bad things, but he genuinely has the best interest of his colony and of mankind. He has the best interest of them in mind, but he's just going about it the wrong way. He really does want to help everybody, but he's just making terrible, horrible decisions. I think that's a sign of a good villain. Although, besides the Philip and Marco stuff, I did kind of like book 5. I thought it was interesting how all of the characters who have been together for the past 4 books get split up, and they all kind of have to deal with their own stuff. And I especially enjoyed seeing Amos on Earth, and that whole storyline revolving around him visiting like his old neighborhood and checking in on the husband of that lady who died, and his old friend who's like a crime lord and all that stuff. And then of course getting Clarissa Mao out of jail. I thought that was a pretty good, step back from all the proto molecule stuff in book 4 to kind of just give us a chill book. But then it never ramped back up until much later. I think book 5 would have been an excellent kind of, take a step back and chill for a minute before everything gets crazy. But also, Naomi's storyline in that book was hot garbage. I hated it, honestly. And then it took several books to get back to the alien stuff, and it's like, all right. So I mentioned in the spoiler-free section before that there was a time jump that I didn't like that much. And most of them I really liked. I thought it was cool to like skip a few years ahead so that we're seeing, the Rocinante's crew, like their entire adult life. I thought it was cool to see them all the way through to the end, to where Naomi's hair is gray, and it's like they're old, like they're getting, it's similar to to the Greenbone saga. I like seeing somebody's entire life. I think that's a cool idea. But the one time jump that I didn't like was I think it was like a 30-year time jump. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but it's the time jump where it basically tells us that that's when Alex gets married again and has a son and all this stuff, and it goes forward quite a bit, and I felt like that was pretty jarring. I didn't like it as much as I liked the other ones, just because like it felt like too much of a time jump. It felt like too much might have happened in the middle there that we didn't really get to see. um yeah, I don't know, it was just a little weird. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't like my favorite. So let's take a second to stop and talk about some of the good in here too, because I don't want this to be all negative. It's mostly going to be negative, I'll be honest with you. But there were some things that I really did like. I liked the proto molecule and the way that that kind of kept evolving, and how eventually it became like this hive mind where everybody's connected. I definitely think that that should have been explored more, and I was kind of bummed that it wasn't. But I liked the idea of it, and I liked oh my god, that the Amos reveal. Holy crap, when he gets shot in the head, I had to like I had to pause the audiobook and just kind of set it down for a while, because I was so mad. I was like, they killed Amos in the most garbage way ever. And I had to reach out to one of my friends on Twitter who's just finished the series recently. And I was like, I can't believe they did Amos like this. Like, I'm legitimately upset. And my buddy Jim from Fantasy for the Ages was like, just keep reading, I promise there's a reason, just keep going. And I was like, okay. And I kept going, and that reveal at the end was very much appreciated. I loved him coming back. He's got the proto molecule in him, and he's basically unkillable. And he's just it was such a good twist for that character, because he was probably like I Amos is my favorite character for sure, but I can see how someone would say that at that point in the story he was getting a little bit boring and a little bit samey, which is kind of true for all the characters, but they're good characters. But I could see how someone would make that argument, and so putting this twist on his character just added a whole new depth, a whole new level to his character. And I thought that that was really, really cool. So with that being said, going back to kind of the hive mind thing, I think that these books tried to do a lot of things. They had a lot of ideas for like where the technology could go and like what they wanted to do with this alien stuff, but they didn't really follow through on any of them. I feel like that all the ideas were there, and all the ideas were really, really good, but it's almost like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. And this is what I mean when I say the book it should have been just like 6 books, because then they could have just focused on a small handful of these things rather than like 10 different things that they're trying to do. And it would have been a more satisfying, completed story, because right now it just feels like there's a ton of loose ends. And I don't know if they have plans in the future to like write more books. They may write more books, I don't know, but it sure doesn't feel like it, and it really feels like we kind of got the raw end of the stick here. So after the abysmal 6th and 7th books, book 8 felt like we might be getting back into what the Expanse should be, but it never quite hits the highs of books 1 through 4. I think having a more or less human villain was a big misstep on the author's parts. I think there should have been a big alien threat that binded all the different colonies and political groups together, showing, just it's kind of tropey, but showing the tried and true message that when there's a larger threat than our petty squabbles, humanity binds together and finds a way to drive out the bigger threat, leading to a society that is more connected and understanding of each other. Having gone through this time of turmoil together. And while this did happen on smaller scales, we see this with like certain groups coming together or certain characters coming together. I would have loved to see this be the main ending of the series. It's a damn good trope for a reason. So as we kind of wind down here, let's talk about where the Rocinante crew ended up. I liked Holden's ending because it felt true to his character. It felt like something he would do. And I love the callbacks to books 1 through 4 with the Duarte situation, which was really reminiscent of everything in the first book or two with Julie Mao. I love being able to see Miller again and get some of that great back and forth between him and Holden. However, the whole ending felt rushed. And this is pretty much how I feel about all of the character endings. James Holden, while that was like a good believable ending for him, he kind of fades out. He doesn't go out in like this blaze of glory that I was expecting. He's kind of just stuck on the inside of the ring gate to die. And I feel like that's just kind of doing him a little dirty. Like he should have, gone out in a blaze of glory. He should have been like doing something that was just more like what he did was good for everyone. Well, debatable, but what he did, he saw as the right choice, which is what that character would do. But I always pictured him, if he was going to go out, I pictured him just going out in a really cinematic way with saving everybody somehow in like a big explosion or something. I don't know. It just felt like he kind of faded out. Like all of a sudden it's just like, okay, James Holden's gone. It's like, I don't know. And it's just like, that's James fucking Holden. You know what I mean? I just don't get it. And the other thing that I really didn't like about his character in the second half of the series is he's kind of benched for a couple books there. And it's just like, ever since he had gotten taken to Laconia, he wasn't the Holden that we all know and love. And I think that, they were trying to do something with that and trying to show us how much that changed Holden, but it just wasn't enjoyable. So I don't know. I feel like they did him kind of dirty, and it sucks. And Amos had an interesting ending at the end there. I actually really liked that, and I think that it was good for the epilogue to see this world, millennia later or whatever it was. I think that's pretty crazy to see that he's still alive and he's basically like the leader of Earth. He's probably like a god to them, honestly. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I would have liked for like a 4-part epilogue or something where we see where all of the characters kind of ended up. And in one of those epilogues, we could have gotten Amos, and that could have either been the very last piece of the epilogue, or the last piece of the epilogue could have been Holden on the other side of the ring gate, and some sort of reveal, like giving us the hint that there's more to come or something. I think that could have been really cool. Or having Holden have some sort of interaction with the gods, like he's out there now with the alien gods. I think that could have been really cool. And that probably would have satisfied me a lot more. But certainly some of those epilogues should have been the other characters finding out what happened to everyone else. We literally know nothing about where they ended up in the end. The only thing that we kind of know is that Alex went to be with his son, which is a really weird character move after he was just a piece of shit dad and husband his whole life. I really liked Alex at the beginning. I'd even be curious to go back and watch my other video to see what I say about him. But I honestly kind of hated his character there at the end. He gets married again in that time jump, and I thought that this would be his redemption arc, raising a new family and having a son and all this stuff, and that he would be more involved, or that they would be on the Rocinante. But then, like, one sentence later, you realize that he fucked that up too. It felt really weird for him to all of a sudden decide to go to be with his family now that he doesn't have any other options. He's out of options now. And so he just takes the Rocinante and goes out to where his son is, which that's also weird. I understand he's the pilot and everything of the Rocinante, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I think it should have stayed with Amos and Naomi and Teresa, right? Like I feel like that, like they should have had the ship. I felt like that was just a weird decision, especially if they're going off into the unknown. Like, why not? I don't know. I guess maybe there was no other way for him to get to his son other than taking the Rocinante. I'd have to go back and do a quick reread of that section, but it just felt wrong. You know what I mean? But even then, we still don't know what happens to him. We don't know if he finds his son, or if he, we know nothing about where he ends up. We know where he was going. We don't know where he ends up. And we know literally nothing about Naomi and where she ended up. And I was waiting for the moment where she would burst out of the doors of the Rocinante to stay with Holden on the other side of the ring gate, or at least say goodbye to him, like have one more heartfelt goodbye with him. Get again, like that cinematic, like get that scene, like get that heartfelt emotional scene. And we didn't get much of one between those characters, besides a really quick scene where neither of them really acknowledged what was about to happen. And I thought that was really sad. That scene, the scene that did happen, should have been a nail-biting moment where you wonder if they're saying goodbye for the last time. And I guess you kind of were, but again, it felt so flat. It was just there was no emotion in it. And that's, if you guys listen to the podcast, as you know, I'm like the one who loves the emotional moments. That's what I read for. And it just didn't happen. And then Teresa, we know nothing about what happens to her or the other two kids that had the proto molecule in them. I imagine the other two kids are probably with Amos and they're still alive and everything. But it's like you spent all this time building up Teresa as like this big character, and then we don't know what happens to her. Like, I just don't understand how you can end a book this way. Like, how can you end this series without telling us? Like, we don't know. Like, it's just mind-blowing to me that we don't know where any of these characters ended up. It's so weird. I've never seen anything like this. The two characters I thought for sure were getting set up for a return were Prax and Philip. We never find out what happens to either of these characters. And we do get a little bit of Prax in, I think, book 6, I want to say. But other than that, I would have loved to have seen him at the end there. I really did love Prax's character. At first, I was kind of like, I don't know about this Prax guy. But by the end of, was it book 2, I think, I absolutely loved his character. I'm super bummed we didn't get to see him again after that. I would have loved to have seen him like with his family and just living his life or something, just a quick something. And it's possible that I missed something, but I don't think I did. And for all the time they spent on Naomi's son and how much they built that up, I thought for sure he would play an important role later on. I mean, we have him riding off into the sunset, leaving his dad and basically saying, like, maybe my mom was right. and then we just don't get any real payoff for that. And this is what I mean when I say I feel like the authors had all of these storylines, they had all these threads, and they just didn't have enough time or something to flesh all of them out. And it's just weird. It's like, why would you put that many like storylines in there if you weren't going to be able to finish them? It's just an odd, it's just odd. One thing I really liked throughout the whole series was Naomi and Jim being in a relationship more or less from the beginning. I think maybe they got together officially in book 2, but I think it's kind of a, I don't know if it's a trope or what you would call it, but usually at the end of a series, the two characters that have had like this will they won't they kind of thing, it eventually comes to fruition at the end of the series, and we don't really get to see them live their lives together or anything. It's just kind of like, oh, they're together now, and we can imagine that they lived a happy life. But this is almost literally the exact opposite, where they get together and we get 7 or 8 books of them being together and kind of get to enjoy that relationship and see that grow and blossom and see them care more and more for each other as the years go on, see them grow together, see them fight, all of these things. And that was just a really cool dynamic to add to the Rocinante crew. And then in the end, the part that's sad is they get separated for life. Like, that's the end of it. And so we kind of see this full arc of their relationship, and that was especially sad at the end there, where she kind of realizes that she's not enough for Holden as much as he says she is, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, love that relationship, love Naomi and Jim. I thought it was super cool that we got a whole series with them together. I kind of talked about this in the video at some point, but I really did like the callbacks to the first and second and third books, all the stuff with Miller, like when Holden first injects the proto molecule, and then he sees Miller, and now it's Holden's time to say, hey, we need to talk. And then I forget what Miller says, but he says something that I think Holden originally said in that scene from the previous books. So that was a lot of fun. I liked how it kind of came full circle in that way and kind of connected those two books. And we got to see Miller again. I mean, that was another one of my absolute favorite characters. If he had been alive for the whole series, he probably would have been my most favorite character. So I really enjoyed him coming back, and I really think they should have kept him for the entire series. Even if he needed to die in human form, they should have kept him for the remainder of the series as a ghost Miller who can kind of every now and then give advice to Holden. Whew, okay. So honestly, I've kind of said most of what I wanted to say about this. I'm sure later on I'll think of more things that I didn't like. But regardless of my reservations about the end of the series, I did enjoy my time with The Expanse. I really did. I know it doesn't sound that way, but I thoroughly enjoyed reading all these books. It was just that end there that really got me, because I was thinking, books 6 and 7, I definitely didn't like. And then 8, I was like, oh man, like this might turn into the Expanse that I've been wanting. And if book 9, if Leviathan Falls would have knocked it out of the park and like given me all those things, I would have forgiven the last couple books. But it just didn't. The last book just fell so flat. I think I had certain expectations, and I really wanted to see the series go in a certain way that it ultimately didn't. Yeah, it sucks. I'll probably reread books 1 through 4 or maybe 5, but I can't see myself ever returning to the latter half of the series. There were just so many missed opportunities, and the more I think about it, the more upset I get. Although this rant has been very cathartic, so thank you for indulging me and hanging out while I kind of just get all my thoughts out there and just kind of download them all onto you. I'll probably finish the TV show though and see kind of what happens there. I think I left off right, I forget what season it is, but right where book 4 leaves off, like the end of book 4 is where I got to. Because I think at the time I hadn't finished book 5, so I didn't want any spoilers for that. So I'll probably go back to that, see how they finished up the TV show. The TV show was pretty good. They made a few changes that were whatever. I didn't really care. But overall, the TV show is pretty good. So I'll probably go back to that and see what happens. All right. Well, with all that said and done, what did you guys think of the ending of Leviathan Falls? What do you think of the series as a whole? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you feel kind of meh about it? Let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about it. I would love to get a dialogue going with you guys and kind of take the temperature of the room, see how people feel about this series, because it was really surprising for me. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and give us a follow over on Twitter at Files Fantasy for more unhinged ranting. I'll see you next time, and don't forget to check your doors and corners.